What happens when the world's most powerful military announces a pause in the middle of a conflict it started? Is it diplomacy? Is it strategy? Or is it something the world hasn't quite figured out yet? Because on Monday, March 23rd, 2026, something extraordinary happened, and the implications stretch far beyond the Middle East. President Donald Trump announced that the United States and Iran have reached major points of agreement after he ordered the U.S. military to postpone strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5 days. In a Truth Social post, Trump wrote that the U.S. and Iran have had very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Now, this announcement did not emerge from a vacuum. Just days earlier, Trump had given Tehran 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to all vessels, warning that otherwise the U.S. would target Iran's power plants. That deadline had been due to expire on Monday evening in Washington. And yet, instead of escalation, the world got a pause. Instead of strikes, we got what the president described as productive conversations. But here is where the story gets layered, because the other side tells a very different version. Iranian officials denied that any talks had taken place between Washington and Tehran. Iranian state media, citing an unnamed senior security official, disputed Trump's description, saying there has been no negotiation and there is no negotiation. And with this kind of psychological warfare, neither the Strait of Hormuz will return to its pre-war conditions, nor will there be peace in the energy markets. Think about what that means for a moment. Two completely contradictory narratives broadcast simultaneously to a global audience. One side claims productive diplomacy. The other denies any dialogue exists. In geopolitics, this kind of information asymmetry is not accidental. It is deliberate, and understanding which version is closer to the truth reveals the real power dynamics at play. Now, according to reports, while Iran denies direct talks, there are strong indications that back-channel communications have been happening through intermediaries. Sources indicate that Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey passed messages between the U.S. and Iran on Sunday, and were attempting to set up a call between Iranian parliamentary speaker Ghalibaf and Trump's team. Reports also suggest that mediating countries were trying to convene a meeting in Islamabad, with Ghalibaf and other officials representing Tehran, and Witkoff, Kushner, and possibly Vice President Vance representing the U.S. This is a classic pattern in Middle Eastern diplomacy, where back-channel communications happen through third parties, while both sides maintain public postures of strength. Neither side wants to appear as though it blinked first. And that brings us to the critical question analysts around the world are asking tonight. Why did President Trump reverse course? The answer, according to multiple reports, lies in three converging pressures. The first pressure is economic. Brent crude oil prices surpassed $100 per barrel on March 8, 2026, for the first time in 4 years, rising to $126 per barrel at its peak. The closure of the strait has been described as the largest disruption to the energy supply since the 1970s energy crisis. The head of the International Energy Agency warned Monday that the global economy faces a major threat from the disruption, saying, "No country will be immune to the effects of this crisis if it continues to go in this direction." When global energy markets face this level of disruption, every economy on the planet feels the impact. From fuel prices at the pump to the cost of food and transportation, nothing remains untouched. The second pressure is the Strait of Hormuz itself. From March 1st to March 23rd, commodities carriers made just 138 crossings, according to analytics firm Kepler, representing a 95% decrease from peacetime levels. The effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has been described as about as wrong as things could go for global oil markets. And notably, Iran achieved it not with a naval blockade, but with cheap drones. Consider that for a moment. One of the world's most critical energy choke points, through which roughly 20% of global oil and gas typically passes, was effectively shut down not by a massive naval fleet, but by targeted drone strikes and the resulting collapse in the insurance market. As one analyst noted, all Iran had to do was several drone strikes in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, and all of a sudden, insurers and shipping companies decided that it was unsafe to traverse that very narrow S-curve of that waterway. She called it really an insurance-driven shutdown, where insurers would not underwrite ships and companies would not risk the passage without coverage. The third pressure, and this is where things get particularly interesting for military analysts, involves what reportedly happened in the skies over Iran. Now, it is important to note that the following information remains disputed and is still under investigation, but here is what we know so far. According to two sources familiar with the matter, a U.S. F-35 fighter jet made an emergency landing at a U.S. airbase in the Middle East after it was struck by what is believed to be Iranian fire. The aircraft landed safely on Thursday, and the pilot is in stable condition, said Captain Tim Hawkins, a spokesperson for U.S. Central Command. However, and this is crucial, there is no official confirmation that Iran has shot down an F-35 fighter jet. While some reports claim that an aircraft was hit and forced to make an emergency landing, there is no verified evidence of a crash. U.S. officials have not yet confirmed that an F-35 fighter jet was indeed hit by Iranian fire. In fact, CENTCOM stated on social media, "False. Rumors claim the Iranian regime recently shot down a U.S. F-15 over Iran. True. U.S. forces have flown more than 8,000 combat flights. No U.S. fighter aircraft have been shot down by Iran." What we can say is that while F-35 stealth fighters have been deployed in combat since 2018, there have been no previously confirmed cases of one being struck by enemy fire. Defense experts said if Iran's claims are true, this would prove that an F-35 is not invulnerable. Ali Vaez of the International Crisis Group told Al Jazeera this would be significant, not because it means stealth is becoming obsolete, but because it would show that even an F-35 is not invulnerable in a dense, adaptive air defense environment. Defense analysts have noted that road mobile air defenses can pop up virtually anywhere and give aircrews very little time to react, and these systems can be hidden and will remain a threat long after fixed air defenses are neutralized. Electro-optical and infrared surface-to-air missile systems are especially concerning, as aircraft would have no idea they were being attacked until struck. This raises a broader question about what analysts describe as Iran's decentralized defense architecture. Some defense analysts refer to it as a mosaic security doctrine, a military structure where command and operational capability is distributed across the country. The concept suggests that even if centralized command nodes are neutralized, individual units across provinces maintain autonomous operational capability. This design philosophy, according to analysts, is specifically intended to counter strategies that rely on targeting leadership and command structures. Now let us examine the market reaction, because financial markets often serve as one of the most transparent barometers of geopolitical risk. Stocks soared and oil prices fell after Trump's announcement. The Dow rose 975 points, or 2.1%. The S&P 500 was 2% higher, and the Nasdaq gained 2.3%. Oil prices also dropped. Brent crude was down 10.1% to $187 per barrel after briefly falling as low as 96. U.S. crude fell 9.5% to $88.90 per barrel. The markets did not just react to words, they reacted to the prospect that a potential catastrophic escalation had been averted, at least for now. But some U.S. lawmakers offered a different interpretation. Senator Chris Murphy argued that Trump was not announcing a pause on strikes, but rather postponing a possible war crime, strikes on Iran's civilian energy infrastructure, adding that this was a panicky message to the markets. Whether one agrees with that characterization or not, the legal questions around targeting civilian energy infrastructure are real and are being debated by international law experts. One legal scholar at American University described the threat as, in the best light, irresponsible as it can be interpreted as a threat to attack civilian infrastructure without a legitimate military purpose. Meanwhile, international allies also weighed in. Reports indicate that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz spoke with President Trump over the weekend to raise concerns about potential attacks on Iran's power infrastructure and welcomed the decision to delay. When close NATO allies are publicly cautioning against a planned military action, it signals something important about the international consensus surrounding that strategy. And Iran's counter-threats appear to have added significant weight to the equation. Iran threatened to strike power plants across Israel and the Gulf if Trump followed through on his threat. Iran's Defense Council said any attack on Iran's coasts or islands would trigger mine-laying across Gulf sea lanes. The implications of such an action would be enormous. Several Gulf nations depend almost entirely on desalinated water for their populations. Any disruption to that infrastructure would create a humanitarian crisis of extraordinary proportions. This conflict has also generated significant domestic political debate in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Lok Sabha and spoke about the ongoing conflict in West Asia, calling the situation worrying and noting that the crisis is not limited to the region alone but is affecting the entire world. He added that more than 3 lakh Indians have returned from the affected countries so far, including over 1,000 people evacuated from Iran. However, the opposition raised pointed questions. Congress MP Rahul Gandhi criticized Prime Minister Modi's remarks and said that the Prime Minister is compromised, stating that Modi gave a 25-minute speech in the Lok Sabha but cannot debate in the Parliament House. Gandhi criticized PM Modi for not naming the U.S. in his address and alleged that he is 100% under the control of President Donald Trump. This domestic political dynamic in India reflects a broader global anxiety about how nations are navigating this crisis and the difficult balancing acts required between competing alliances. Now, looking at where things stand as of today, Trump, speaking to reporters in Palm Beach, Florida, said his son-in-law Jared Kushner and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff participated in talks Sunday evening with a top person in Iran. He predicted that the conflict could end in the next 5-day period if the exchange goes well, but also stated that otherwise the U.S. would continue its military campaign. Iran's foreign ministry responded by saying Trump's reversal is part of efforts to reduce energy prices and buy time to implement his military plans. The demands from both sides remain far apart. Reports indicate that U.S. officials have listed conditions including a halt to Iran's missile program, an end to financing for regional groups, and restrictions on uranium enrichment. Iran's position, according to reports, is that normalizing trade through the Strait of Hormuz would require a complete cessation of military operations and a guarantee they will not restart. Bridging that gap in 5 days would require extraordinary diplomatic skill. The pause creates a 5-day diplomatic window. 5 days to determine whether this moment of restraint leads to a genuine diplomatic resolution or whether it is merely a brief interval before the next chapter of escalation. What we are witnessing is not simply a military standoff. It is a fundamental stress test of assumptions that have underpinned strategic thinking for decades. The assumption of unchallenged air superiority, the assumption that economic pressure alone can force compliance, the assumption that asymmetric capabilities cannot impose strategic costs on technologically superior adversaries. Each of those assumptions has been tested over the past 4 weeks, and the results, at minimum, remain open to interpretation. Analysts note that transiting through the Strait of Hormuz is now considered completely off the charts for the rest of 2026 due to the uncertainty and security situation in the region. The ripple effects are being felt across Asia, Europe, and beyond. The world is watching this 5-day window with extraordinary attention. Financial markets are holding their breath. Diplomatic channels, both public and private, are working at full capacity. And the outcome of the next few days could reshape not just this conflict, but the broader global order for years to come. If this analysis helped you understand the bigger picture, consider sharing it with someone who wants to make sense of what is happening. Stay informed, stay analytical, and most importantly, think critically about everything you read and hear, including this, because in times of geopolitical tension, verified information is the most valuable resource of all.